Good afternoon. This is Thursday, March 3rd, and this is the Human Services Committee meeting. Thank you all for joining us today. We will do roll. Chairman Welsh is present. CM Rutherford is present. CM Hauser is present, and CM Benedict is present. So I detect a quorum. Oh, look at that, it came. The quorum is here. So again, thank you very much, you guys, for all being here. Today we're going to be talking about translation and interpretation services and how we can implement a really robust Title VI plan in Metro. At our last meeting earlier this month, we were all tasked with doing some research to look at some basic issues within Metro. And so I really want to go over today what we discovered in our research so that we can use that as the basis for the beginning of our plan. And hopefully we will have something in hand, an actual plan that we could implement fairly easily. I am hoping by the beginning of June, if possible. I think that is possible based on some of the information that I've been getting back from you guys individually. So I want to start with getting some reports. First of all, I want to go to you, Emily, CM Benedict. You were looking at what some other departments are actually already have in place and talking about what works and what doesn't. So if you can tell us what you discovered.
Yeah, for sure. And I've got this over to, thank you, Chair, for the recognition. I sent this over to the council office today to distribute out to the entire committee. And then I don't know, well anyway, so you'll receive this information. It's a short one-pager with just some observations, just a couple of questions that I have, not a lot, but all of the information is attached to it. And I was given probably 20-some documents from different departments from the health. Let me back up. I just jumped right to the report. I interviewed with, rather, over the phone or Zoom, the juvenile court, so Judge Calloway, as well as Kathy Sinback. Her, I'm not sure Kathy's title, but if the judge weren't there, Kathy runs the place with the judge. She's fantastic. They sent me a tremendous amount of information about EEO, about basically touching on everything Title VI that we looked at from that Denver document. They sent that and more. And so I parsed through that for a while, and then I determined that there are some things that are in the other documents, but the main document I've scrubbed and run through, and every bit of it is important for all of us to understand. In a nutshell, everybody's doing their own individual thing, as we had talked about. The departments have, so I'm going to just, I know the audience can't see this, and I'm sure some of you can't from sitting further away, but this is the public health department. They actually have a report on it from 2021. So, I mean, there's some really robust work out there. So these are attachments to what I sent over today. I numbered them as files 01 through 05 so that you can read them. Preferably that'd be the order in which you read them. And so in this report, I started to just highlight the things that are important in here, but it's big font, and I found every single thing highlighted by the time that I was done. So this is, I think, the health department's document is a really good one to copy from for potentially a global view.
We can scale it easily?
I think so. Yep, exactly right. And so let me pull back up so the quick Word document, or the first page that I sent out, it's just really rudimentary, really simple, okay? I try to keep it nice and high level for us, and then we've got the backup details, but I'll run through this. So the health department has the Title VI policy, and it includes LEP. They have an annual Title VI training for every employee at the health department. They have staffed interpreters at every clinic. They just have one, but at every clinic that's there during the open hours, full-time number of hours. And those staffers speak the main languages of the city, which are English, Spanish, Arabic, and Kurdish.
So they have 4 interpreters?
No, the interpreter speaks typically.
Oh, typically speaks?
Speaks
wow.
Some, or if not fluently, of certainly Spanish and Arabic, as I understand it.
And they're actually interpreters, not just staff members that happen to speak these languages.
That's correct. Yep, at the library, and I did interview the library, but I don't feel like I was able to capture a big enough scope to report to the committee, so I'm only presenting information from the health department and from the juvenile court, but anecdotally, the library,
Has
I'm so
people who
sorry.
speak the language?
Yeah, I'm sorry, like receptionists. Actually, that's true also with the health department. There are receptionists, front desk people, or some other staffers, doctors, that speak maybe Spanish. And so they're able, maybe they're fluent, maybe they're not, but they're also able to assist through that to help the customer in this. We keep kind of talk about customer mindset when we talk about how are we treating people. Are we, how good of an interaction do they have with us? And so the next thing, so the other thing that they do is LEP is housed underneath their own department's HR person. So,
Interesting.
yeah, I found that interesting too. And I don't know if that's purposeful or if it's just needed to go somewhere. Sometimes that's how, we need a Veterans Affairs department, for instance, right? But right now it falls where it falls until you're intentional about putting it somewhere. And maybe they were intentional. I'm not sure. Maybe, it certainly seems like they're doing a great job, so it must be working. If a staffed interpreter is not available, then they use a language line. The juvenile court uses 7 different language lines that come through the state. The juvenile court uses a lot of state resources for Title VI, so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel.
The health department is using their own, or they're using Metro's?
So the health department has, no, they're using a separate service altogether.
Their own contracts?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Well, that's the one, so the contracts for juvenile court are state contracts that they're using. I'm not certain, I didn't ask if the language line, I believe it is an outsourced, it's not Metro staffed. It certainly is an outsourced.
No, Metro has a contract itself, we have this contract. So I just wonder if they're using that service or they have their own separate service.
I think they're using the one that,
Metro?
I spoke with Dr. Wright, and I can't imagine that, if they are doing it by the book, knowing him, and that,
Yeah.
so, on things like that, I can't imagine they wouldn't be, I just don't know where the contract lies.
Okay.
Then the report, so that, I said it, in this page, it's very thorough and could be a model for the components of what a global policy should have. In the juvenile court, they have both a Title VI policy and a draft of an LEP manual. And that manual is 48 pages long. It is attached to this stuff. It is a grab what you like, grab what you don't. But when we look again at an overarching LEP program, it's a phenomenal model. They have drafted a program that will, sorry, I'm trying to open it back up here. Too many things at once.
It's interesting, why did they need the 2? Do they feel like the missions are, they obviously would overlap.
For
having separate LEP manual, because you would think that would fall just under Title VI.
So Title VI has other things? So Title VI, so LEP is here, whereas like if Title VI is the umbrella,
right?
And then there's the different. Is that right? Is that the way I understand Title VI? Is
with
that
the
you've
buckets?
got? Yeah.
With the different buckets.
Let me.
Yeah.
Say it.
I guess I just thought the policy would be single. You did some research into the actual Title VI, so you might know.
Yeah, I was researching the standard
Right.
For
The
like
trigger,
when it
yeah.
triggers. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One last little bit here just is sorry, as I'm again trying to get to it. Too many windows open, you guys. That's why. I found this to be strange at juvenile court. All translation services are managed by one employee whose salary is funded through grants. So what happens if we don't have grants? Do we always know that we're going to have those grants to keep that person employed to manage the overarching program? And that includes everything from the I Speak cards, which I've got attached as well, where I'm sure we've all seen them, but just to help. So that's one of the 5 attachments, just FYI, they're not all 48 pages. One's just a 1-pager. But I would be concerned what happens if that person, if we can't fund that person. Do we let them go? Do we find money in the operating budget? How do we manage that? And so I think if there were a global policy, maybe a global person could be, I don't know how you do that for an entire city government, but county government. Anyway, that's the overarching piece, is just a couple of different models that I think we really could dig into. I could dig into them further. I finished up everything last week and tried to just get it together in a good semblance and parse out the documents that were important, and just got through that today. But I think digging down into what those two, I think that is the thing, the ask behind the ask. Right.
Do you know how are those things budgeted, those services? Are they a part of their general budget that's coming through Metro and how we're doing it, or do they have separate pots of money that they have their own, out of their their own little general funding, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
Because that's obviously the question for anything that we would come up with plan-wise, right?
Where's the money?
Where's the money? Isn't that always the big question? Where's the money?
So,
Are they line items, I guess, in their budget?
I'm gonna have to look at this because it's an interesting note, and when I saw it earlier, I didn't research it, but I wrote down, and I know this is televised, but I mean, it's all open, it's important, but these are my notes, which are rustic at times. The rates of compensation come from Rule 42, which is specific to juvenile court. So, that's why I think they probably use the state contract.
Okay.
Because of the funding?
Let me look that up, I'm sorry.
It's okay. But that's definitely something that we would, that would be good to know. Because I think that's been one of the holdups in doing this before, like when the Human Relations Commission was looking at this and all that, has been money, like where is this gonna come from in Metro? We're gonna set up a certain, where is Title VI gonna live? Where's that money gonna come from? And then how are we gonna do that underneath the Title VI umbrella? How are we gonna do this system-wide? So the hitch has always been the money, obviously. So I just wondered if they
Right.
just decide on their discretionary budget they
And I
wanna
would
do
think
that.
there's stability of the money too. In other words, what's the source, is this like a one-time source, like our ARP funding is a
Right.
one-time source? Which is fine for a pilot to get you started and see if something works or not before you find other sources, but you do need something that will go year after year,
Yeah,
because
that
you don't wanna set up
regenerates.
an expectation that we're gonna deliver something and then next year not be able to deliver it.
Right. So, does anybody have any questions, or did you have anything else?
Rule 42 is specific to the courts.
Okay,
So you've kind of got verticals in there, right? So you've got the courts, and then we've got other branches of government that I'm sure report into certain state agencies. Like the assessor's office has certain state policies because the equalization is a state
right.
mandate, right? So I'm sure that I don't know if that's the best example, but this one is specific to courts. So I don't know. That's because it's a whole branch of government, probably. Probably everything else falls to one policy.
Yeah,
Because you've got 3 branches of government.
right.
So the courts might have their own thing. That's a question.
I would think that they would, only because you have to be able to serve everybody who comes to court, right? You would want people to understand what's going on, so I would think so, but that's why we're researching.
That's exactly it.
That's why
That's-
we're researching, so we
Yeah.
can find out what's going on here. Does anybody have a question for,
Thanks.
or anything else that you think we should have CM Benedict look into?
Do
in
you
this?
want me, Chair, to go deeper on the 2 model type programs, or do you
That
want
would
us
be
to?
great.
Okay.
That
I'll
would be
go
great.
deeper on those.
Since you've got all this space
I've
knowledge
already-
and you've already talked to them and whatever, I think that's really great, perfect.
I'll
That
go
was very
deeper and give a book
thorough,
report.
so you're well on your way.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was just
exactly.
like, gosh,
Thank you.
I feel like I did a puny little snippet of work you did.
Yeah, I
Well,
kinda
we're gonna
feel the
find
same
out,
way.
cause you're up next. Woohoo! CM Hauser looked into what would be required of IT if we had live interpretation services during meetings, specifically like a council meeting, and what we would need, so.
Right, and I got some of the information, but all of it isn't available yet, because I haven't got to their vendors to find out.
Okay.
What I did find out, because now if you are watching our meetings on TV, you see the scrolling of closed caption across your screen. Or if you look at the recordings, there's closed captions there. But we don't have it in the chambers itself, it's just on that. And for that service, we pay $14,400 a year.
And that's in English, correct?
And that's in English.
Yeah.
So every language we add onto that would be another $14,400. And that is not a human being typing, it is an automated system, which means it takes a little while for it to learn. But I will say, because I have watched like replays on TV of the closed caption, and in English it's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So it really does that. So the reason I bring that up is it may take a little while for the Spanish or whatever other language we choose to be accurate. And so we just kind of need to give that caveat to folks. It's probably going to be close, but it may not be exact. But they said that the artificial intelligence system is capable of doing Spanish, and they didn't say what other languages, but it is capable of that. So I assume it would be like if you're on your TV, you can choose what language. So I assume it is something like that. I don't know. I haven't seen a demonstration of it.
Do we know anybody in the media business? Because I wonder if they could help answer that. I mean, I'm thinking like Channel 5. I mean, I think they know us. I think we know them, right? But I
Yeah.
just was thinking, I wonder if they use that service, or, I mean, it's not government, but with live TV.
I can find that out. I
Yeah,
haven't
or
done that.
NBC
I'll check
has
that out and see
Telemundo
if they
and
can help us.
Comcast.
But anyhow, they
Sorry.
did say that the software is capable of different languages. It's just another $14,400 a year for the other one, so it's not that bad.
It's
The-
like nothing.
The,
And that's specific just to the council meeting?
or
or
anything
any
that,
meeting,
anything that we're
any
doing
language.
that we want to do that with, yeah. So I assume that it could be anything
Tied to
we're
M&N, right.
broadcasting. Pardon?
Tied to M&N, right?
Yes.
So for example, this meeting is being closed captioned
Yeah, because if you watch it on TV, it is closed captioned.
for the same 14.4.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very inexpensive, actually.
So it's extremely inexpensive, but you have to realize it's not a human, so it's going to be a little while before it's perfected. But like I say, the English, I know I've watched meetings, and it's pretty darn close.
Well, if I was typing, it'd be terrible, so it's probably better than me.
The other thing
Typing is really
is,
bad.
and they said that the company is willing to give us 10 hours of free to use the test and see if it works. So that is it. Now, that's only a portion of it. That's for people who are not live here in the building. They do not yet have a cost on what it would take to have monitors with closed caption on it when we're in the building, which I would really like to see. But I don't want to lose what we got, so it would mean purchasing additional monitors to be able to have the closed caption on it, which shouldn't be that terrible. The challenge is they do not know yet on what the delay would be, because what they said is, like, the language would have to go heard in our room to that translation
Right.
service and then back to us. So the delay might be really confusing to people. We don't know, because normally with closed caption, the delay is maybe a line or two if you're watching TV.
Right.
But if it's doing another service, since it has to go the signal from here to the signal
Right.
wherever and then back, it may be as much as half a minute.
Right.
But we wouldn't know during this 10-hour experiment, we could kind of figure that out.
Right.
If that delay is just so much that it makes it impossible.
Right.
But what I would like to see though is the monitors in the room, so if somebody's sitting in our chambers, they can understand what's going on, not have to have their phone on their
Right.
portable TV to be able to know what we're doing. And especially if somebody is going to speak on something, which typically they're in our chambers, there's something they feel passionate about that impacts them personally.
Well,
Or they
that's
wouldn't
horrible.
take the time to be sitting here in our chambers.
So do we know what the delay is like right now when someone is watching live on M&N, that it's what the delay is?
It's not very,
Because you wonder if we could just simply be broadcasting MNN like internally, closed circuit, and then having it so it would stop that delay, so it wouldn't be a separate feed. Since we're already doing it live to somebody just watching who's not actually
yeah, I
physically
don't know.
present.
And
We
the other
need an
thing would be,
entertainment
if we want it translated, do we
audio
want to
and
have a
AV.
monitor with English and another monitor with Spanish?
Right.
So, I mean, those are all things to think about. I just need to get some more cost, and they hadn't gotten with their vendors to know just what all it is. But I would think the first step would be to say, let us try the 10 free hours just to see what it works like
Right.
as a basis before we even think about spending money beyond that.
Right.
Because that would be, a cheap quickie thing. But I do want to get these other costs. They did say that if they need an encoder, which evidently that's part of what they do when they listen to us, to translate it into, or to put it into English now, that uses what they call an encoder, and they don't know if they need to purchase another one to do that. If they do, that would be another $10,000.
Encoder, okay.
So what we're looking at is a $14,400 per language, and we may also need an encoder for each language, which would be another $10,000. So basically
But
$25,000.
that's a one-time shot.
Yeah, that's a one-time
expense.
shot.
Okay.
That's not an every year. That's equipment.
Okay.
So it seems pretty economical. It would seem like the biggest thing is it going to be functional?
Right.
If this could be functional, then it looks not that expensive. And I know myself, sometimes I have a hard time hearing in cancel. I'd probably be looking at English CC as it is, especially when I have people around me that seem to think it's pretty silly.
Right. So one thing I would be interested in is there an ability to track how many people would, say, watch in a different language, even, to see how many people are actually accessing it, to see what the need really is? Like, I would like to know, like, if we had an Arabic translation, like, oh yeah, we find that there are, 60 people watching every meeting or something,
But,
just to know it's actually being used.
I think it's kind of like before ADA. You heard businesses say, I don't need to put in a ramp. None of my customers are in wheelchairs.
Right.
They put in a ramp, they found they had all these customers.
Right.
It may be that same sort of thing. We haven't offered it, so how would we know
Right.
to count it?
That's a good point.
Right. But after we offer it, it would just want
Then
to
we
like to
would know,
track
yeah,
and see.
right, yeah,
So
then
we
and
know.
I think it'd be very good to know that, if whatever way there is to track it. But I do think a lot of times we just think, well, nobody needs that, well,
Right.
because it's not available. I mean, because at the time, I remember I was in commercial lending, and I remember so many businesses saying, oh, we didn't know there were that many people on crunches that would come to buy
Right.
or whatever, and they were just astounded.
I think the question in there would be, is it possible to track it? Do we know that it can be tracked
Right.
after the fact? Because once we implement it, if we do so, then we would want to know that we're reaching so many
Right.
People that we couldn't reach
to say,
before.
yes, this is
And-
viable, we needed to do this clearly, or nobody's using it, so we don't want
Right.
to do it anymore.
And-
Yeah,
and
we
I
can
guess-
answer that question,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and I can ask IT,
Yeah.
do they know how many people use closed caption now?
Yeah, even now in
Yeah.
English.
Yeah,
like how
and
many
I don't,
people
and I
actually
don't know
access
if there's
We use
even
it
a
all the
way to
time.
track that, because
and-
it's being
yeah.
done at a person's home.
Yeah.
It's not going, in other words, the closed caption is out there, but people are accessing it from their home, which is not a piece of equipment we have
Right.
access to, so I don't know, but I will ask the question.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know. That is honestly, that's very inexpensive.
Yeah, I was glad to
Mhm.
see, I mean,
Yeah.
and the monitors themselves, I mean, we wouldn't have to repurchase those, but every maybe 4 years or something, so it's not like, it just sounds like not that much money to
Right.
provide something to a large portion of our population that English is not their first language.
Right. Then the other question would be, like, with what currently runs on MNN with the closed captioning, could this service work like a YouTube, that you would change your own feed as you're watching specifically? I'm changing the closed caption to Arabic, like after
Would-
the fact. How does that work that somebody actually accesses the actual
Yeah,
closed
and see,
captioning in the different
I
languages.
don't know that, because I don't think YouTube is translating it. I think whoever is sending that feed to YouTube has to.
But somebody is, so I mean,
Yeah.
this would be this service, I just need to know, how do people
Right.
access that? The different languages, to know they're there and then go, oh, you can pick your language for this, so we would need to know that too, and how easy it
Yeah.
is to do that. Did you have anything else, CM Hauser?
That was pretty much it. I was just looking into what it would take to be able to have closed caption in English and in other languages in our chambers as well as online.
Perfect, does anybody have any questions? Great, we're moving right along here. CM Rutherford, you were looking into what triggers actual Title VI compliance, so we make sure that we're meeting those.
Right.
And what we would need to do on the broader level to make sure we're actually in full compliance.
Exactly, and mine was fairly short and to the point, I think, and I had sent you what I had found earlier on, and I didn't send it again after your request, but I looked into various levels of government in my research, local, state, and federal, and I found something in common at each level, basically, and what seems to be used more than not is a very gray, if you will, reasonableness standard. And in a reasonableness standard, it can be interpreted very loosely, and we probably should actually engage with council legal staff about reasonableness standard and how that works within the law in Tennessee, because the example that I sent you was actually out of the federal government, but that can leave us potentially in legal jeopardy because because if we have a reasonableness standard, then we don't have a true standard. It's not a black and white standard, and so I think that would leave us needing to make the determination as a local government. Do we have our own reasonableness standard, if you will, or do we come up with our own standard, our own trigger? Because it's not commonplace out there as to what that is or should be, because everybody seems to be going in that direction of just a reasonableness standard. And so basically when there's an outcry for service, then that's when service tends to happen as opposed to not. And so that's what I found more than not. Really, anytime I found anything that addressed it, it tended to be that legal reasonableness standard. And so I think council legal staff should probably have some input on that to give us a little bit of guidance on what we might want to do. And we can make that determination as to if we want to follow suit because it seems to be what most everyone else is doing, or do we want to create our own standard and figure out what that standard should be.
Would you be willing to follow up with Metro Legal and actually get some guidance
Sure.
from them?
Sure. Happy to do that. I think that's the next logical step, but wanted to discuss it here first.
Okay. It's unfortunate that CM Stiles is not here tonight because she was looking at sister cities and what they are doing and possibly would have some insight into how they were interpreting what a reasonableness standard is, assuming that they set up their Title VI programs and all that under that same standard. Does anybody have any questions on that? I think it's probably, if we go back to, at the last meeting, we handed out this report from the Metro Human Relations Commission. I think it would probably be good for us to actually look through that again to see, because the Human Relations Commission did some very good research into this community and what people within this community who are not necessarily English proficient or not, English is not their first language, what they felt, how comprehensive Metro services being offered were and what they felt like were the holes, so that we could look at that and see what people have already said, this is what Metro is looking at, and then tie that to, is it reasonable, does that fall under our standard to say that this percentage of people said they would participate more if this was actually done in their language and they feel left out and cut off and they can't access effectively and efficiently with their government. So once we know that standard, we can go back and look and see what people are saying and figure out how those two things work together. In terms of what we would decide, these are things that we think this is our minimum standard of what we need to provide.
And I would say as we look at that, we need to increase whatever it says. Because of the fact, if something's not been offered, then people may not even express that they would like to have it.
Right.
You know, it's just like whether you're reporting crime or whatever, if you don't think anybody's gonna do anything, why would I do that? But if you start seeing some action being taken, all of a sudden the numbers go up. It's because now people have enough confidence in the system to report something. And so I think as we're going through this whole process, we need to keep that in mind too.
Right. So maybe we should have a certain percentage assumption, like, you know, in construction, they say
Yeah.
they give you a thing with the 10% over or under because we know
Whatever the
something's gonna
number
be
is, yeah,
incorrect. We
probably
just have to figure out,
add another 30%.
right, or something,
15,
whatever
yeah,
we
just-
feel is reasonable to
Yeah.
add to make sure that we're not, you know, underestimating and undercounting. Because that would be the worst if we're not gonna hit that.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of that you just don't think.
You
that
don't
any-
miss what you don't know.
Yeah,
but you don't-
right.
Yeah, you don't miss what you don't know, you don't
And I
have.
would say, and if you don't understand what's going on, you just kind of go into this la-la land. I mean, and I know that because I don't hear well.
Right.
And,
Right.
and like if I'm in a really noisy room and a lot of people are talking, and I'm looking at your expressions and I'm trying to make my expressions like yours, I have no clue what you're saying. And I don't want to scare you by when you just said that you had a grandchild, you know, and I looked
Right.
startled. So I'm just, you know, I try matching that just to be in, and it's easy to drift off. And that can happen to even people when they're very interested in something. They just get to that frustrated point of give up.
Right. Well, that's good insight to have someone on the committee who runs into this problem. Of not being able to understand what's going on and needs something else to make sure you understand for the, you know, the
Yeah.
whole,
I mean, it just happened to me when I had an event just a week ago. My daughter later said, "You were watching me to see how I was reacting to this person who was talking." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I didn't realize you realized." She said, "I could tell from your eyes you were trying to see what my expression was so that you gave the right feedback." Because I could not understand. But yeah, I mean, I use closed caption at home all the time to the point that I don't even notice that it's there. In fact, about a year ago, I was watching a show, and about 15 minutes in, I realized, oh, they're not speaking English. I was so
seamless.
That's
No, it's the
hilarious.
kind of thing, in the beginning, it's very irritating, but once you get, so basically what had happened is my brain realized I wasn't, so it just turned that off.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize it, and then all of a sudden I just started laughing and realizing it was from Turkey, and I realized, oh, they're not even speaking English, and I have no problem with that.
But you know, in some ways, that should be our standard, that anything that we provide should be seamless like that people don't have to be bothered by, that they just feel like they're a part of it because they're seeing it in their own language, understanding in their own language.
Yeah.
And so they feel fully engaged in the entire process.
And I think that takes a lot of not only stress off from people, but encourages them to be part of what's going on too. And we as a council, and we as a government, we need to know what's happening with our people.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we cannot provide the best service possible for them. And so I'm really glad that you brought this to us, to start considering doing work on this. I think it's very important.
Well, and a lot of what we've been talking about, my job, besides to compile all this into one thing when I have all the information, was to figure out, to get some ideas about a communications plan to kind of get the word out about all this. Because we actually already offer several different things here in Metro that, like for example, all the knowledge pieces on Hub Nashville and things. You can access them in 5 different languages if you know where the widget is and you can turn it. And I had no idea, and I'm somebody who.
I had no idea either.
Yes, so these are the kind of things that we.
Cool, yeah.
They're really cool, and we need to make sure that people know that these things exist. So I think that we should, obviously we should start using social media through the various departments to explain what those departments have in terms of what they're offering, like the health department, like we have these things, don't hesitate to come and access care here and do these things because we can provide this to you. Mm-hmm. So like through the different departments, through the council, each district, to let people know you can access information. Through the mayor's office, through United Way. United Way has a huge dissemination system to get information out, and I'm sure United Way would be happy to do something like that, to partner somehow to get that information using their channels. That Metro offers these things because they too want people to be more, totally engaged. We can go through the school system in their newsletters and in their e-blasts to make sure that all the students and their parents know. You can access all this information in your native tongue, or you can ask for someone to do that and we can provide you with that service, because right now people don't even know we have these language lines available that are immediate, that you can call right then and there. You can call and say, I need someone who speaks Arabic to translate for this person, and have that taken care of. So the school system, they do a great job. They did a great job on the census and getting the information out to all the parents and families. And then that in turn spreads to their communities, the immigrant communities, the non-English speaking communities, so that's a great thing. We need to hit up some professional organizations and nonprofits for Bridges, that deals with the deaf and the hard of hearing, to get out to their communities and other professional organizations, Turk, all those nonprofits and things that deal with the with non-English speaking people who don't speak English as a first language. They can put things in newsletters, they can do presentations, we can come and explain to them what's there, how they can access it, how they ask. Just explain to them so they can tell. They can also do social media. We can use other systems within Nashville. We can use NES inserts to say, did you know that? In the native language, in the languages, to say that you can see, did you know that? You can get all these things translated, or if you have a problem in Metro, you can request this and we can get this. In any department, they can call these language lines, things like that. Obviously, we can do big press pushes, get stuff in the newspaper, get stuff on radio, get stuff on television, explain things, walk all these reporters and everything through that so they can, help us push it. And then hit up the neighborhood associations, just, like the neighborhood organizations, council-wide, and then like neighbor to neighbor. That also has good systems of dissemination to get this kind of information out. So we actually have quite a few avenues to get the information out about what we already offer. And then I'm sure once we start putting that out there, we will also get even more feedback than maybe even the Human Relations Commission got. That's very formalized. Informal things about what people might come back and say, I wish they would do this, and then we can figure out what could be incorporated or not incorporated into a plan. If it's feasible, do we have the budget for it? Is it something that's gonna be used widely enough to justify any expense or whatever? I almost hate to talk about budget because I have been one, I founded a nonprofit community radio station, and our entire thing is, the entire reason we founded this, besides we felt the media was under attack and democracy was under threat, is that we don't think that money should determine who has access to the media in order to advocate for themselves and to speak for themselves and to present their own communities and their own cultures. And so that was the reason that we did it, and why everything is absolutely free, because money is always this barrier. So if we're talking as a government, like budget-wise we can't afford it, then we're just lopping off entire segments of our community by saying it's not money, so I almost hesitate to talk about budget and think that could be a reason we would say no.
Other than it's a reality.
Yeah.
You gotta find the money somewhere. But, yeah, it looks to me like it's not gonna be nearly as a financial burden as I thought it might.
Right, but now in other things with other departments, if
Staff.
they're
I
staffing.
mean, people
if
are
we're doing-
tremendous, 14,400
But
a
that's
year
why
isn't
anything
gonna
you
get us
can do
anybody.
automated.
Better not
Right.
be anybody. If we,
Right,
31 grand is, $15 an hour is the, so it's
Yeah.
double the price, to get a person in at the lowest entry wage, which I don't think is ever a good thing.
No.
Nevertheless,
Yeah. Especially for those skills, you're speaking four
that's
languages.
exactly right.
Well,
I was
the
looking at the-
challenge is somebody who understands that department, whereas I think these meetings are a little different.
Yeah,
You're not necessarily needing
Oh,
to
right.
be able, that's why I think this, we can do, I would not feel comfortable saying the courts be an automatic language interpreter,
no,
because.
and I think by
Yeah,
law they
but-
can't be.
But
You
doing
have
our
to-
meetings, that doesn't seem as problematic.
Right.
But what you're talking about, they need somebody who understands that department as well as the language, so that they can explain to somebody how something's gonna impact them. So that's
Right,
different
that's the
than our
difference.
meetings kind of thing.
Right.
One thing too is just in the in-person side of things, the library actually, so there was a transition in people, in addition to me not really getting my finger on exactly what I was trying to find there, but I got some great information. But they have a phenomenal deaf and hard of hearing program manager at the library. Sandy, I think her last name is Cohen. It's around here somewhere,
is.
but yeah,
Sandy
Sandy Cohen. you might know from
I
your
do.
daughter's
I
experience.
know Sandy Gordon.
She said that one of the challenges that they've run up against, and they've been lucky to find answers mostly, is when someone is deaf and spoke Arabic.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And so how do we handle something like that? Well, it exists. I mean, that's a Nashvilleian. It's important that we make sure that they have as much opportunity as somebody that's not deaf, hard of hearing and speaks English, you know, in our government, in our city rather. And so that's a conundrum, and I think we definitely have to work towards the 80%, not the 20%, right? But how do we? I mean, that might be a problem. Yeah, do you look for the needle in the haystack? I'm not suggesting that that doesn't happen ever. That happened. Does it happen as often as somebody walking in the health department needs to speak Arabic?
Right.
That happens much more frequently. It's not to dismiss or minimize that in any way. It's just a matter of resources.
Right.
Where do we allocate resources? And so that's, I was looking at that report of yours, and because I was reading it, because I did my homework. I'm a nerd. And this is the Metro departments with the greatest community interaction. And so the library and public health are 40%, social services is also 40%, police 29.5%, juvenile courts 24.5%, etc. So, you know, Metro Human Relations Commission, MAC, Circuit Court, Criminal Court, County Clerk, Public Defender, Parks and Rec, State Trials, General Sessions Court, Arts, Election Commission, DA, and Fire. And that's, Fire is at 6.7% all the way up to 40%. So anything less than 6 points, I guess the rest of government is less than 6.7%. So if we focused on these offices and implementing the policy maybe in these offices, you know, like, I mean, not implementing the policy, who am I to say,
Right.
but you'll have electronics of those too. I guess, you know, maybe that's where we start somehow, is to say, what are you doing? I mean, and we've already done it with 3 of them,
Right.
of
Right.
the ones that are listed here. But I mean, I'd be curious, because you're talking about something totally different than what I talked about with them. And so when, you know, how do they translate into, but I guess live feed is really I don't know, there's so much to.
Yeah, it's like a dual track with
It
meetings.
is.
But like I
and
say, you know, it depends, because some of the departments you're talking about, somebody really needs to understand. So if this person I'm interpreting for replies back in a certain manner, I need to understand that program enough to ask them the correct follow-up question. And that's totally different than what you can do automated-wise.
Right. And a way to, like, in that example that you gave of somebody, a deaf Arabic-speaking person who ASL obviously wouldn't work, because that's American Sign Language. You would have to have someone. But that's how when we get the word out, there are several, you know, Arabic language newspapers where you would put out what the services are there, and perhaps that's how you find out, are there Arabic interpreters here who, if there are problems that Metro could draw on somehow and figure out a way that we could, you know, partner with other, again, community groups or whatever to, not that we'd be asking anybody to do anything free of charge, obviously, but just to know what's out there in terms of those resources that are out there that we could actually maybe if nothing else, if we couldn't provide that on a regular basis, we could make that resource available to, like, the Nashville Public Library. Here is somebody who is Arabic and does Arabic Sign Language, and so if you have a need for something, this is someone who perhaps could help you with that. And so just so they would know what the resources are, and maybe they could create their own partnerships and things like that.
And then part of that communications that you were talking about, and I really like you were talking about all those sources to get the word out, is also letting folks know if you have a need and you're gonna need something special, let us know in advance. So we can have that Arabic speaking sign language person there when you come in. Because I think one of the things we heard, I think it was in this meeting, I'm not sure if it was this one or another one, but of court cases getting rescheduled because someone shows up and the interpreter of that language is in another court and they can't get over here, so that person has to take another day off work to come back because there's not an interpreter available. And so, you know, needing to know all those things enough in advance that you have the right personnel.
Right. Right. And that could also be on the front end, knowing that whoever is scheduling the court dates, can know dates and
Knows, I
times, like we
mean-
have, 4 people who need Arabic interpreters, so let's put them in court all on this day when the courts are in
Can go one
session.
after yeah,
Yeah.
because you don't want
Even-
people coming back and forth, yeah.
We push things out in English and Spanish when we remember to push things out in Spanish as a government, right? Typically, we're seeing now, thank goodness, intentionality around when something is, when a flyer is created or a website is created, a Safe Nashville.org, right? COVID-19 Metro's website.
Everything was-
You can click on that and it'll translate it like many web services do, and multiple languages. It's great. But when we do a hard copy of something, it's English or Spanish. And not to say, how do we create? We don't want to create 10 of everything, but how do
No,
we help
especially if you're
people
printing
on
it.
that then say, we could probably do different languages and say go to this site to.
Right.
I don't know. Can we point people who speak another language other than English or Spanish, because those are predominant in the city. Those are clearly the 2 most spoken languages in the city. Could we put something on all the marketing materials that say? I don't know, and that's just one section though.
Kind of the line at the bottom in that language.
Yeah, that says and
just,
go
just
here
like,
to.
when at the election sites, when you go to they'll have the sheet and it'll have all these languages and you point to the one you need.
Yeah, that's the.
But if we just had like the top
That's this
3 or
guy.
4 language,
Yes.
Yep, that guy.
But it was in their language what the link is.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Well, I think people know when you see an HTTPS, just type whatever those letters are. I guess, I don't know if it's Arabic or other languages with different characters than English. I don't
You
know.
have to have a computer that
Yeah,
has
right.
those keys on it.
But I would think generally people know how to get to a www address,
Yeah.
right, in any language. So, I could be totally wrong though. I don't want to make an assumption
Right.
like that.
It would be interesting to know how many interpreters are actually working within Metro, like
That would be
between
that would be
all of the
curious,
different
yeah.
departments,
I wonder if Shannon Hall could
And
find that.
and they may be
I
a
don't know how
good
we'd find that.
resource
If
for
we just
our
had
Shannon.
research.
Shannon might know, or
Shannon
actually I
Hall.
wonder, I haven't read this entire report, so maybe that's actually in there somewhere. Shannon
But
might, I'm sorry.
But those interpreters would be a good resource for us, because they can tell us what they're running into.
Right.
Yeah, that might be a great, actually, really good next step.
What do we do well and what do we not do well?
Water,
What are they seeing as needs?
Leoncio, am I thinking his name right?
Yeah, well,
But he does translation for codes and at the Shared Services Center, and for Historic, I had a contractor who was Spanish speaking and so he did the translation.
Yeah.
And that person was there multiple times because he had trouble following directions regardless of language.
Yeah.
But we do have Leoncio, I think that's his name. He's a water employee, I believe.
Huh.
But he works there at the one-stop shop, and he does translation for codes and historic, and some of that for building permit type questions.
No, so he does the interpretation? Okay.
I think the challenge we see is that we have all these one-off solutions, and they work, I think, except for when they don't, and how do we know that they don't?
I think Theo was by them, right?
Was he?
That's my understanding of the council, but he's not their president, so.
On that report, one of the things that it talked about, and I can't find it now, but it's not that, but the one, your report.
Yeah.
But these are gonna be emailed. That's a one-pager, this is just a one-pager, my recap.
Yeah.
This is the first page of a 48-pager. So I only gave you the first page so that you'll know to write 48 pages, be ready. And then, I've got 2 of these, somebody's got another one. There's another front page for
Got it.
something. And then
Yeah.
this is that full report, which this to me would be a model. These 2 would be good things that we can model off of, which that says there. So, now you're caught up. I forgot what I was
But so we know from the Human Relations Report, the percentages of people within the main departments that deal primarily with speakers of other languages that would need this. So it would be interesting to find out from them how many interpreters they have within there, or how they access the interpreters. And then see what the feasibility is of having like maybe an office of interpretation when you have people, some of these staff people who can actually be shared with other departments. But again, how are they funded? How are these interpreters funded? Are they full-time staff? What are they doing? And are they relying on people?
located in the places where we need them,
Right.
or is phone better? Some people
Right.
won't do phone as well, or can't understand phone as well as face-to-face, so.
Right.
And
There's-
are these interpreters all Metro employees, or are they contractors that we call upon when we need them?
Well,
I
you
think
said there's
so
staff,
it's some
right?
of both.
Yeah.
So, juvenile court doesn't have any staff. Now they have one person who's in charge of it. But
But the health department has staffed interpreters.
the health department has, David coordinates all translation services and he's paid for by grants. Now, I didn't catch David's last name in this, but there's one employee who does translation, who oversees all of translation at juvenile court. And they're in charge of that, but they really just coordinate with the language lines. They've got 7 of them that come from a state contract, 7 different vendors, so they buy off the state contract in that case for those 7 lines. The health department has a bilingual staffer, maybe trilingual in some cases, staffer at every clinic. So that whenever somebody comes in and they're there during open hours. Now they might be with somebody and so somebody might have to wait, there's just
Yeah.
one. But then they also use a supplemental language line when needed.
Which seems like that should answer all the problems that they might have, given the language line is pretty immediate.
Yep. Well, he did say that the only problem with that is sometimes there is a 5 to 7 minute wait on that line. And so, but
not
one
bad.
thing about the health department is that they also are like certified in HIPAA compliance, because sometimes they actually have to go with the patient into the examination room. So, they've got to be that, totally confidential, and it's a really specialized position.
Yeah. And I think most interpreters, like I know sign language interpreters, you have to be certified in certain things, and you have to sign NDAs, and you're under a rule that you can't, of confidentiality and privacy in all things.
Right. Oh,
You
right.
can't talk about stuff, and
Wow.
have to have special insurance in case you interpret something incorrectly and it
Oh,
causes
my God.
harm.
Oh, wow, yeah. Good,
Which is
yeah.
why, like in law, there are very specialized interpreters who are incredible, because they have to have a full understanding of the law. So they are interpreting
Right.
everything correctly, so it's not, you don't,
You're right, because you could really
Mess up
impact that
somebody's life.
person's entire life.
yeah.
That's a lot of responsibility. That sounds.
I think people burn out pretty quickly, or can burn out pretty quickly, especially if they have a lot of really intense cases, because that's a lot of stress and a lot of
Yeah.
pressure on you. So you can see how broad this whole
Yeah.
issue is. So the last thing I wanted to do was to see if we could come up with at least a couple of steps of what we thought might be the plan that we'd want, so we could get the next steps of what we need to do. In some ways, we've already done them. You're gonna look into the reasonableness, and you'll find out more about the money for doing that. That's, again, separate thing. We'll have to do some research. You're doing further research in there. I'll find out how many interpreters are within Nashville, working within Nashville, and whether they're staff people and those kind of things. Because I think we still have some questions that we need to answer before we can figure out what the broad picture is. Though I think that, based on what you said of how the health department works, if we could figure that out on a system-wide level, that seems like it works. Do they run into a lot, that would be another thing, do they really run into a lot of problems with that, or does that really, they generally just run smoothly?
Yep, they're running smooth. Now, I don't know what they do for the deaf and hard of hearing, but, because that's, I don't know how we handle that in any department, right? I mean, when you go to the county clerk when you go to pay your taxes, for instance, let's go, you go to county clerk to get tags on your car. Is there somebody there that's
Well,
does
this
sign language?
says that, well, for sign language specifically, I can say.
It's like, that is a language.
Yes, and they might have TTY services, you know, that
Which is kinda out of date, right?
it is kind of out of date, but I think a lot of places have that and think that that's enough.
Yeah, right.
I know some, I don't know if it's really within Metro, but, or with the health department per se, but I know sometimes they do contract with bridges that work with the deaf and hard of hearing, and they
Yes.
provide interpreters all the
That's right.
time, yeah.
Okay.
Because I guess that's less frequent perhaps than some.
Well, and that's, I think, playing to the 80-20, right? So it's easy to get caught in the weeds of the 20 because they're also one-off, right?
Right.
But if we focus on the 80%, and this is another thing from that report where it says, based on the survey responders, what departments do they interact with most? And courts, NCAC, emergency, library, police, public health, public defender, social services, beer permit.
Beer permit.
Yeah, I know.
I would have
Dear
thought that
Board-
was first.
Dear Board is a judicial body.
Oh,
Dear Board's a quasi-judicial body, so they
yeah.
have that service. 'Cause
I
they
guess,
do.
would that be related to people who own restaurants? I
Yes,
guess.
restaurant
Oh, yeah.
servers,
Yeah, oh, the servers, I hadn't thought about the
yeah,
servers.
if your server serves someone without you can get a significant fine.
Yeah, right. And maybe another interesting thing from the health department would be if they keep any records about how many people they cannot provide services for, like deaf. Are there instances when they simply cannot, have been unable to provide the service for whatever reason? And like what the reason was, if they keep those kind of things, any kind of record keeping like that?
Overall, this seems to say that they have interpreters that are available upon request on site or over the phone with OPI services.
OPI is
Over phone interaction or
That's
something.
it.
it
It
stands
says
for.
that it's on site as well.
Yeah,
But
they
yeah.
have a staffer at each location,
Yeah.
and then they also have a language line available. So, I mean, the health departments, and so that's what my next to do
It
is.
says it
is
went
to go
from
do-
8,000 a month typically to 282,000 during COVID.
Calls?
$282,000 in their
Oh.
invoices. So it sounds
Oh,
like it's a
wow.
contractor,
Yeah.
contract service that they provide, but
Because I think that's billed, it's like per minute or something.
I think that's right.
You know, it's like what it used to be before cell phones and stuff.
Oh
It was
gosh,
billed
remember
like
long distance by the
remember?
minute?
Right, oh yeah.
Right, so I think
I
it's
think
billed.
everybody's
like
old enough in this room. Good thing Zach's not in here.
Really, the
Oh,
rotary
gosh.
dial-up.
Oh, we had a party line.
And then you got to where was that?
We had a party line where you share it with your neighbors.
Oh,
I
yeah,
had
I
that.
did
Because that
when
we
I
all
was a little
remember our
kid.
telephone number
Yeah.
from when we were in elementary school. So we
931
remember it.
3829.
They're not what they sound like.
And get off, I need to make a call,
Yeah,
I've been on
yeah.
the phone for half
All
an hour.
right, we're
Anyway.
talking about human services and phone calls.
When,
Sorry, Chair, I gotta.
Oh, no, no,
one
that's-
time
that's-
I had when I used to do consulting for healthcare practices, this dentist's office, they had a spare phone in the closet that was an old dial phone, so if the power went down, they could still call out.
Yeah.
Well, the dentist's daughter came in and she wanted to make a phone call, but all the phones were being used, and we told her there's the one in the closet.
Oh, no.
We didn't think to tell her how to dial a phone. She was putting her finger into each number.
Oh, that's
And wondering
funny,
why
on
I
the
wasn't
dial.
doing anything. And she's like, I did it. I said, well, show me what you're doing. And she goes,
That's
I said, no, you need to drag it all the way around. And she's like, looked at me like that was the coolest invention ever.
Oh, I know. And it is now, looking back on it. It's
Yeah.
cool to the kids today.
It still truly is. And obviously, the other big thing that we'll have to start really thinking about, if we can start pulling together real tangible numbers on stuff, like what do they pay actually for interpreters and to staff all these things and that kind of stuff, so that we can, if we need to translate that into other departments, but as you say, we have to find people who are very knowledgeable by department. But if we start doing that, to figure out what that would really look like in terms of
And
monies
so-
that we would need to find.
And kind of help me here, because I've kind of forgotten what our original goal was on this. Are we looking at something metro-wide
Yes.
to start with? And then are we gonna break it down into pieces we can do? Are we, others, is it an all or nothing, or are we saying first priority is this department needs it, or what are we gonna do?
Well, I think we're gonna have to prioritize, because I think the way department budgets work, I mean, we don't, we don't have say over the minutia of their budgets, and so it's
Right.
gonna be, but like, what you're talking about, the meeting aspect is something I think that we should look at immediately,
Yeah,
that
I
could be
do
implemented.
too.
Seems like it could be
And
implemented
that seems
simply and
appropriate to us
whatever.
being Metro Council, that
Right.
should be one of the first things we say.
Right, but the broader issue is that we need to get a real Title VI plan in place that actually meets
everything, yeah.
federal muster, and then provide the services under Title VI that are required by Title VI. And a big aspect of that is translation and interpretation services for any department that receives Metro money. And that's the out for some departments if you don't receive Metro dollars, you know, but again, as I pointed out to someone the other day, with ARP funds, that is federal dollars, and so you are under Title VI. So right now, probably everybody is, because everybody's gotten something,
Some
I
piece
think.
of that, yeah.
Some piece of it. So we just wanna make sure that we have a Title VI plan in place, a Title VI office that can help with those kind of issues, and then make sure that we're doing the things that Title VI. That's obviously gonna take longer to implement, but if we can lay some groundwork to get a Title
So
VI.
we got a stepping stone.
Right,
yeah.
we gotta have a stepping stone. But we need to know that we are being compliant, so that when people are signing off on documents and things, that
They
we
know
know that
the
they're
way,
actually in
yeah.
compliance with Title VI. And we need to have, right now, as we mentioned at the very first meeting, the Title VI officer is actually housed under the Metropolitan, under the Human Relations Commission,
Right.
which is probably a very good place for it to be, but it needs to be more, have more actual
Visibility.
and visibility within Metro, because right now there's nothing behind it that can be enforcement or to set up programs.
Yeah.
And we probably need to revisit that and make sure that the Title VI officer has some real authority to do things and implement programs and get these things taken care of and make sure that they're in place.
Yeah, and one thing I was just thinking is, you know, we promote Nashville as a welcoming city. And so to me, making the minimum of Title VI is one thing, but then I'm hoping that we're able to do more than the minimum to just satisfy Title VI, so that we can really feel like we are being welcoming.
Right, exactly. And I think it'll really help when CM Stiles is back and can send us her research about
other
what sister
cities-
cities
So it's gonna ask.
have in place and what works, because many other
Yeah.
cities, comparable cities, have really robust Title VI offices and really provide this service all the time. So what
Well,
we
I
can
would think
steal.
coastal cities would be good examples. I mean, you know, because they have people with so many different languages, like California and Texas. I would think they would be
Right,
more likely to have multiple languages and programs.
right, right. And I guess we'll see from her research. So does anybody have any other questions or concern? Because I think we pretty much hit on everything today, so next time we come back, we'll bring the next pieces to our research.
Yeah.
And then hopefully CM Stiles will be here and she can let us know or forward to us what she has learned, so that we can pull that all together and start
Sounds good.
stealing, cutting, pasting, finding money and getting something in place.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan.
Good.
I'm glad we're taking it on.
Yeah, really. Well, if no one else has any questions or anything, I think that we are
So we're sitting here with three.
officially.
We're gonna meet on the same schedule.
Ginger. What were you-
Oh, yes, before we go, if it is still amenable to everyone, Thursdays at 4:30 during council weeks, if we can meet, continue to meet until we can get this done, because we need to get this done first, and then we need to jump back to our, at the same time, we need to be working on our whole homeless issue, but this is taking precedence per the vice mayor. So if that still works for everybody, the next meeting would be, what would that be, March 17th? Actually, that's St. Patrick's Day. But so we could do it before everyone goes out on St. Patrick's Day and does whatever you
Or we
do
could
on
have
St.
one
Patrick's Day.
really fun meeting.
Or we could have one really fun
We
meeting.
don't have to have the meeting here, do we? As long as it's recorded? I mean, it's probably easier here.
Yeah, it's probably easier here, so we'll see about that. But right now, March 17th at 4:30 here, and we'll pick up this thread, and hopefully we'll be able to have a base that, for the next meeting, we'll actually be able to have some sort of plan that actually starts to take shape, that we can start getting vetted.
Sounds good.
Thank you all so much for being here, and with that, we are adjourned.
Okay,